Welcome to RESGEN's Giving Life podcast, stories and conversations about life in Christ, everyday discipleship, and exploring ways that we as men can give life to others. My name is Tom Henderson, the founder of RESGEN, and I'm so glad you're joining me for today's episode. My guest today is Mike Goodwin, a friend of mine who joined us at this year's RESGEN Men's Summit. Mike is a refreshingly funny comedian and speaker who uses his ability to merge leadership and laughter to leave people and places better than he found them. On today's episode, Mike and I talk about a ton of great stuff, including the shift that happened in his mind and life when his identity became less about what he did and more about who he was, how laughter can help our work culture and overall lives, and the role that professional counseling has played in dealing with the pain from his childhood and his overall mental health. Here is my conversation with the bow tie comedian, Mike Goodwin. Well, Mike Goodwin, it is good to have you on the Giving Life podcast, my friend.
Hey, good to be here.
Man, I like being able to share space with people that I like.
Hey.
And so
That's important.
Yeah, exactly. And I love it because, you know, we were able to be together for a couple months ago at Date Night Comedy,
Right.
the RESGEN Men's Summit, and share the stage. And so now we can just kind of share a table and have a conversation that hopefully I think is going to be fruitful for
Right.
continuing, you know, our relationship. But hopefully I think even just for our listeners and those that are watching, I think they're going to gain some good insight out of our time together.
I hope so.
Yeah, that's good. Well, let's start just by giving a little intro of who you are, because this might be an introduction to some as to who Mike Goodwin is.
Right.
And so you'll just give a quick little synopsis of who you are, your family, where you live,
Right.
that kind of thing. Then we'll get into it.
So I'm Mike Goodwin, a refreshingly funny comedian. I live in Columbia, South Carolina. Have a wife and two children. I'm a Southerner, so born and raised in Camden, South Carolina. Once I graduated from high school, I joined the military for a number of years. Got out, went to college, got a master's degree, and then I was on my way to become a college administrator, and then comedy found me, and the rest is history, as they say.
Oh man, I don't know that I've ever heard, and I intended to ask you what was the road that led you to full-time comedy, but to go from the trajectory of college administrator,
Right.
you know, like working in a college administrative environment or whatever that would have been, to standing on a stage and doing comedy, that's quite the transition.
Yeah, it's a hard pivot.
2020 was the year of the pivot. You pivoted way back.
I'm visionary. I'm before my time.
Okay. So first of all, what was the draw to college administration at first?
So college literally changed my life. You know, I'm a kid from lower middle class family. I'm the oldest of two children. My parents didn't go to college.
Okay.
And I could have just stayed at home and gotten a job. But I said, man, now I want to go out here and get a degree, experience the college life. And so I joined the military. When I got on campus, you know, I had this utopian thought of college, like, because that was the goal. Like when I went into the military, I said, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to do 4 years to get the GI Bill Montgomery College Fund. And so I thought about like sitting under oak trees and playing hacky sack and you know, going to lectures and tying sweaters around my waist, all those types of things. And I went to college, and I didn't have that experience, but it had a good experience.
Yeah.
And it showed me, you know, I think exposure is so vitally important for just young people who are from limited backgrounds. You know, if you see more, you can aspire to have more. And once I got to college, I just saw that I'm a gifted guy. I had a lot of value to give to an organizations or to just to the world. And college kind of set me on that path for me to achieve those goals.
Mm-hmm. Was there certain was it professors or certain teaching or certain things that really kind of spoke? You mentioned the word value, and I love that word, right? Because a lot of times we can feel that we are not of value in for a variety of different reasons, and we'll get into that, I think, in a little bit. But what was it that college, you said, that really spoke value to you? What was that?
I think it was all of it, because my introduction to the military showed me that I could have a career in the military. So I realized I could have a job. And I knew coming from my hometown, I could have worked a job. So then when I got into the military, I was like, oh, I could have climbed that ladder, but I wanted a lot more autonomy. I didn't want to be within a particular type of structure. So college, it was just, I think just the vast opportunities. When I got to college, I became a resident assistant. I shot video for the basketball team. I was in student government. I was giving tours. I mean, it just opened my world to so many different options. I met people from other countries. It was just such a profound experience. Professors, I think that I'm not. So you asked about was there one particular thing, but I remember this first semester I had this English professor who was hard. I mean, it was just he was a hard professor, but he was fair, and I learned and I grew and I became a better writer. And I remember I was in this leadership program my freshman year. What had happened, they had this, I went to Lander University, which is in Greenwood, South Carolina. So they had the Lander Presidential Leadership Program, LPLP.
Okay.
And basically, as a freshman, you could have applied to be a part of this year-long program. And it didn't matter your grades, your test scores. What they were trying to identify is a group of leaders in the class, and they were going to cultivate them in this kind of leadership seminar type experience. And they were only taking 30 students out of the freshman class, and they typically would have, 150 applicants, 200 applicants. So it was kind of selective.
Yeah.
So I saw that program. I was like, man, I want to be a part of that. So I applied. I wasn't a great student academically as a high school student, but I had been in the Army for 4 years, and I grew up.
Yeah.
So I did my application, but when I came in and did my interview, it was hands down. Like we have 29 spots open. After. we had 30, but this guy's getting one of them. So
that's awesome.
I was a part of that group, and some of my classmates, we had the same professor, and we would have these leadership. We would meet, I think, maybe twice a week, and we had these big lecture, kind of navigating through life's big questions type things. And I think one of the times we were talking about how the semester was going, how were students doing. And I had some of my classmates that were in that class just like break down crying about how tough Dr. Wilson was and how, they just never had a professor who just was so exacting and he was so demanding. And I loved it. And they were like, they were not going to sign up for him second semester. And I was like, no, I will be right back with Dr. Wilson because I'm growing as a writer. And I mean, my papers were red. I mean, just bleeding red. I went down to the writing lab to get help. Like I said, what can I do? It's like, go down to the writing lab. And so those types of experience, I think I need in my life, I need somebody or people or groups of people to hold me accountable for what I say I'm going to do. I say a lot of lofty things, but I need folks to say, hey, Mike, remember when you said this thing? We're looking for you to produce it. So I think that's what college represented.
Yeah. Oh, man. Seriously, we could probably have an entire podcast just unpacking so much of the stuff that you just talked about. But there's a couple things in particular in there that I really loved is that you went in with the mindset of saying, I am going to really dive in and find opportunities. Because a lot of times, I think that it's easy for us to say, well, I'm going to let the opportunities come to us, or I'm going to sit back and which there's a time for that.
Right.
But to where we really take ownership and say, we're going to go and dive in. We're not going to put just one toe in. We're going to dive in and say, all right, I'm going to get involved in this and this and this and this. And college is a great time to do that.
Right.
But, if we have some college students that are listening right now, it's tempting to make college more of a time, just hang out in your dorm room and play video games forever, or, just use it to exercise the independence that you're finally excited to have and all that. But, and obviously I think that your military probably helped, like you said, grow up and create some discipline. But you really looked at saying, how do I even diversify my involvement?
Right.
Which I thought was crazy good, because then you kind of found that. And then the second thing that really jumped out at me was that even though it was hard work, that one class specifically, Dr. Wilson, you said?
Dr.
Is that right?
Wilson.
Yeah. But you leaned into the work.
Yeah.
And that's against human nature sometimes, right? I mean, we're something's hard. We're like, I don't know that I want to do that.
Let me back up from it, right?
but you said, no, I want to lean into it and say, what do I got to do to be better and rise above?
Right.
So,
and that is a great illustration for what happened with me in comedy. Just in life in general, you never are penalized for working hard. I mean, you might not get what you want. It might not always pan out the way that you thought it was going to, but you're far better off than you were when you work hard.
And that's an important point that you just made is the work doesn't always result in the way that you wanted it to come out or that you thought it would.
Right.
But that doesn't lessen the importance of the work because we learn so much in it
you're
regardless.
Stronger, you're faster, you're wiser, like you come out better.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. That's good. So tell me about just your journey of faith and when did you say, because I know that your relationship with the Lord is obviously very important to you and leading your family the way that God calls you to lead it. So when did that like really grab a hold of your heart and say, I really want a relationship with Christ and that faith is going to be the foundation of my life. Did you grow up in a Christian home? Tell me about that.
College again was the turning point for my faith. So I grew up, I tell people I grew up in a halfway Christian household. So my mother was a person led by the Holy Spirit. My father was led by spirits, Jack Daniel, Jim Beam, the various spirits. So I grew up in a Pentecostal Church of God in Christ environment, and my mother took us to church religiously. And I was a little Pharisee for a while. Like I was like a church boy, and everybody was going to hell if they didn't do the right stuff. I was always judging. I was, you're going to get in trouble. You shouldn't do that. I was doing that until about the 6th grade. And then I found these words that you could use to put some color in your speeches. There's some seasoning. And I just couldn't stop using those words. And I had been told that if you're using those words, you're not saved anymore. So I guess I backslid, because that's probably the worst thing I was doing in my youth. I was, messing around with girls, but I wasn't having sex or doing anything. And so I kind of backed away from the church in terms of like being identified as a Christian. I had faith, but I was more low-key undercover Christianity, right? And so about from the 6th to the 12th grade, I was just a regular little knucklehead kid. I wasn't in my faith strong, but I wasn't on the enemy side either. I just wasn't. I was kind of neutral, if you could be in that regard. And so I joined the military after high school, and my faith, I guess that's why I was in a more of a backsliding spot. But I remember when my first duty station was in Korea, and I was a basketball player. I enjoyed playing. I was above average. I was an okay player.
Yeah.
And so when I got to Korea in the military, you're just with a bunch of grown men. Like I was 18, fresh out of Camden, hadn't traveled, hadn't left my town that much. So I was pretty green. And I made it to Korea like January of '94. And the basketball season had just started. They had just started, and I made it to my unit. And they was like, "Hey, you a basketball player?" I was like, "Yeah." It was like, "We got a game tonight. If you're interested, you can come out." And I was like, "Cool." And I went out, and I probably had like 10 points, 4 rebounds, 5 steals. I had a good game. It was like, "Who's this new guy?" So now everybody brought me in. All these grown men are like, "Come hang out in my room." And I remember the first weekend, I was asking everybody, "Hey, where's the church?" And they were like, "What do you need to go to?" I was like, "I want to go to church. Like, go to church on Sundays." Just out of
routine.
That was my routine. Yeah, I went to church. So I went. They was like, "Hey, the church, the chapel's there. Here's services." But that kind of put me in a different category. So the guys were like, "Yeah, you can hang out, but once things get a little crazy, like, hey, Goodwin, you might want to, you can't go with us this time. So like just me going, and I didn't go to church anymore after that. I went to that one service and I didn't go anymore.
Was that because of their input?
No, it was just like I went and I was like, oh, this is cool. But I guess I felt that I just wanted to be in church that Sunday, something familiar.
Okay.
But I didn't connect, when I went to that particular service. It didn't. But it kind of protected me within the group. And then my mom, over the course of the time I was in the military, every time I talked to my mom, have you gone to church? Are you going to church? Are you, no, all that. And so I finally got out of the military, went to college, and met like the Christian group. There was like a strong Christian group of folks when I got to my campus. And I ended up actually marrying one of the women that were in that group.
Okay.
And when I got there,
is that what drew to the group, Mike? You
not
saw
really.
her across the room, and you're like, "When's Bible study?"
I need to start going to church. Well, it was the opposite of that, right? So when I got to school, I was not the church guy. I was not looking for the church.
Yeah.
I was looking for the club, and so I got the club. I got the college like big man on campus. So here I am, a freshman. But I'm 21 years old with life experience. I know what I want. I know why I'm here. So I looked like a super freshman, maybe like a JUCO guy if I was an athlete, right? Like I was the guy that didn't get recruited out of high school, but I went to Kansas and then my skills were amazing. And so that's how I was, but it was sin. Like my skill was sin. I was an amazing center. And so I got to campus, right? But I said, I'm not playing church. Like I had respect for God. And I knew that once I committed to a life of faith, I wanted to walk that out. Like I wasn't one of these guys, unlike my buddy. So I hooked up with this guy, who was a buddy of mine. And we were just running the campus, running the streets, and we would party. And this guy would get up 8:00 Sunday morning, like, hey man, I'm about to go to church. I was like, call me when you get back home, because I'm not going. And then I went one time with him. And he was like in the church with his hands up. And I was like, dude, what are you doing? I just saw those same hands holding a Budweiser 4 hours ago. What are you doing? So it was an interesting, and in that group, they some type of way ended up going back to my home church like an hour and a half from our campus. Like they met our pastor, who was very charismatic and had a heart for young people. And so a group of folks from my college started going back to my hometown. And the young lady who is my wife, she started like speaking into my life, like, I see you. I think she was having these dreams like, man, there's so much more that God has for you. And I was like, nah, nope, I'm good. I'm straight. Talk to me next year or whatever. So I always was dodging those conversations. And then it became a point where I had this void, right? So I had this emptiness, and I knew, I grew up in the church. I knew, as a child, people always were telling me that I was going to be a pastor. I knew I wasn't going to be a pastor, but I knew that my light would be significant to the world. Like I knew that my walk would influence people, but I wasn't ready. Like I'm like, God, I'll get back to you. Like I'm gonna go over here. It's like you hear guys, or you hear people say they want to become a lawyer, make a bunch of money, then they want to go and like help people. Like, no, man, help people. And as you help people, whatever you need will come to you. But I had that kind of mentality. Like, I'm gonna go over here and get all this sin out of my life. And then when I'm all cleaned up, I'll come back. So this was my second semester, my sophomore year. I had been dating this girl, and then she and I broke up. Her dad like restricted her to talk to me because he found out we were doing some things, and I was like, she's been doing this before me. Like I'm not the first person. So they had invited me on this family trip. They said I'm not going to be able to do that. I would call. I couldn't. He wouldn't let me talk to her. So I was like in this crisis of like, man, I really like this girl, but it's opening my eyes to like, man, I can't keep doing what I'm doing, the things that I'm doing. And even a little bit before that, the void I was talking about just started feeling like it was getting bigger. So God's calling or, compelling me to make some changes. And so what I would try to do is cover it up with other stuff, whether it's alcohol, women, party, whatever it was. And it would subside for a minute and then it would just come back bigger. And it was just like this gaping hole on the inside of me. And I just knew I was empty. Like I had all the boxes checked in my life. Like I was academically doing well.
Mm-hmm.
Here I am, a former veteran. I had vision and goals for what I wanted to accomplish, but I wasn't in God's purpose, right? So started gnawing at me, eating at me. And so this was, we went home for Christmas break. And this was actually the transition from, I think, 99, from 1998 to 99. And so that was that New Year's. And my cousin was like, hey, man, let's go hang out. Let's like go to the club or something. Let's go over and find somewhere to hang out tonight. And I was like, yeah, but let's go to church first. Like, let's go to church. We were having, New Year's Eve service. Yeah. Like, let's see the new year in at church. And then we'll go and have a good time. And I never made it to the good time. So like I was in church at New Year's Eve service and we were sitting like the next to the last pew. And this is my church I grew up, small Church of God in Christ church. And I'm sitting there and I'm having this literal battle with myself where I knew it was time for me to come to the altar. It was time for me to, give my life to Christ and turn, make a 180 and go a different direction. And I was kind of battling like, nah, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. And I always knew, I said, whenever I made the commitment, I'm in. Like, I'm not, I'm not perfect by any stretch, but I'm committed. I'm going to be. So, so I'm thinking like, what are they going to say when you go back to campus? I joined the fraternity that my freshman year. So this was like my sophomore year. I was like really the big man on campus. And I was like, no, man, it's time. And so like before I even, like I was having this kind of mental battle and I just automatically got up. And I think the pastor had like made the appeal. He hadn't made the appeal yet. Like, but I started coming to the altar before the appeal was made. And so by the time he had gotten to the appeal, I was like in front of the church, hands up like Chewbacca, like I was broke. I was over, man. Like it was such a joyous, because I think when I left, like other people came and it was like such a burden that was lifted off of me. And from that day, I've been walking in faith.
Yeah, that's a great story, Mike. And it just goes to prove too. Like sometimes it is a wrestling match when God calls us to do something, whether that's take the big step of saying, Jesus, I really do want you to take control of my life, to even just the small decisions that we make on a daily basis. Chances are, when we do what God calls us to do, we're going to probably end up disappointing someone.
Right.
And it's going to maybe even change some relationships.
Right.
And it's so funny that you mentioned that your now wife, at the time, she was just started speaking into your life. And I think, she saw some things in you that you didn't see in yourself, because the Spirit, the Holy Spirit just was already speaking to her about you.
Right.
And I think about my story of it's very, very similar in that when I started dating my now wife, we've been married now almost 25 years, and which you just hit 20, right? Yes, yeah, 20. So congrats on that.
Thanks.
But I remember, when I had asked her out, she said, well, we're first going to go to church. And I'm like, well, okay, but we're going to go see like a movie and a dinner and all that stuff. She goes, yeah, that's fine. We're going to start. We'll do all that Sunday after, but we're going to start at church. And on that Sunday, her youth pastor was actually up. Like he was in charge of kind of leading some worship and then preached that service. It was kind of the youth-led Sunday or something like that. And we were singing and all this kind of thing. And I love to sing. And so I was like letting my best voice come out and just wowing her, because we were both servers at TGI Fridays. And she trained me how to be a server. And I would always sing along with the soundtracks. And she always used to like listen to me sing. So I'm like, wow, I'm going to sing some gospel, some worship songs. It's going to go to the next level. But she looked up to me during the time when the pastor, or when he was leading, and as I was saying, she looked up at me, 'cause she's a little shorter than I am, and she just said, I could see you doing that someday. In fact, I think that's, that God's going to be using you in some sort of capacity in that way.
Right.
And in my head, I'm thinking, no, I don't think so. Because I was on a pre-med track at that time.
Right.
That's what I was doing. I was in college pre-med, and I'm thought, no, I had my plan, right? I had my plan. Well, lo and behold, all of a sudden, God, shifted some things around,
Right.
and I jumped in with both feet the similar way that
Right.
you did, and the rest is history.
So I got an interesting story about my wife, right? So when I got to campus, she was on the Christian group. Like she was a part, gospel choir. I think she had probably rededicated herself maybe a year before I showed up. And she had gotten to this breakup, and she went to her journal to write like what she wanted in a mate. Well, down to my glasses, like I was what she wrote in this book. And then I show up on campus, not saved, right? And so we ended up dating, so I came down one day to lunch. And when I first came to school, I didn't wear glasses. I just had my contacts on.
Yeah.
So, and I was kind of more like B-boyish. I had more like the LL, like one of my pants leg rolled up.
Yeah.
That's how we did it back then. And I had like my t-shirts on. Well, this one particular day I started, I cleaned it up. I went like boys to men on them. So I put on my button up. I put on my glasses. And I really got, I put on my drip. I guess that's the way the young folks say it. But I came to the cafeteria, and the way our cafeteria was, you come down. It was like on the third level, so you walk down the steps. And Rosalind, who was my wife, she must have saw me and was like, "Whoa, what?" Who? And so her friend saw that, and as I was coming down, her friend yells like, "You really need to take her out on a date. Like, come on over here." And so I sat down with them, and she was like, she hadn't been on a date in so long and all this. So we ended up going out. I went out with her and had a great time, but I knew she was a Christian, and I wasn't at the time. And so we started talking, and then, she would invite me. There was times like, because I had a roommate, and like we would have people over. So if my roommate had somebody over, I would need to find some way where to stay.
Yeah.
So Rosalind had like this little couch, but it's like a bed, little fold out thing.
Like futon type thing?
Yeah. So I would come over there and say, "Hey, my buddy has somebody. Can I stay on your couch thing?" She was like, "Yeah." And I would lay down on this thing and never go and attempt to do anything, because I was just like, she's legit a Christian, and I'm not going to be the reason that somebody stumbles in their faith, even though she would have been probably open to me like making a pursuit, because she was liking me. She was interested. And so I was even though I wasn't a Christian, I felt such a respect for God, the God in her. I never put her in a compromising position. And I knew, I was just like, I know what I'm doing when I'm out and about. So I'm not going to be, I'm not a person, I'm a loyal person. So even if I'm in sin and I'm messing around, even the girls I was messing with, they were not my girlfriends. Those were the women that I was having relationships with. But I knew that I wasn't going to play like I'm your guy or your boyfriend and to be doing all of that. So like I never did anything to put her in a compromising position, even though I wasn't a Christian, because I felt like I respected her, but then I just feared God just from my upbringing. Like I just knew that. And it was enough going on. Like why bother people that are living holy, that are walking in faith, when there's enough out here to not be doing, to get other people distracted from their walk. So I'm like, I'll stay out here with the worldly folks, and I'll leave you alone. And so that's how our relationship started, because I just never put her in a position like that, because I knew. I said, there's not going to be anything that comes out of this.
Yeah. And then the Lord, eventually got a hold of your heart and then brought you together. And now you got 20 years and a couple kids, and and I'm sure that she still is one of the primary voices that speaks into your life. And I think that that's one of the things that's just God brings people together, and I think about the wisdom so many times that my wife brings into my life. Sometimes I'm maybe not in the right place to listen to it all the time, where I got to be like, oh, okay, I got to check my spirit and say, yeah, you're right, honey.
Right.
Yeah, but the balance that they can bring into our lives and the wisdom that they bring, there's just something about the way that God speaks through our wives that is just something special. So.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. Okay, so I want to talk about a couple of things before we're gonna have to wrap up. So, but you and I have talked about identity
right.
a couple different times, and so I want to talk with you about the kind of shift that you experienced in your mind and life when your identity became less about what you did, just like as a comedian,
right,
or
right.
Because as guys, it's so often it's about our title, the letters behind our name, the plate on the door,
right.
like comedian Mike Goodwin,
right?
Pastor or speaker Tom Henderson,
right.
or whatever it is. So what was the shift that happened within you when you kind of let that title go? And it was focused more on like who you were and what God was doing in you and how He'd wired you and all that.
Yeah. So when I first became a comedian, I took it as a badge of honor, just to be able to say, I'm a comedian, and you get up in these nightclubs and bars and wherever, and you're making people laugh. And so I had the standard trajectory. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna grind it out. I'm gonna try to gain notoriety and fame, and I'm going to try to get on as many stages as possible. I need to try to attract the attention of the industry, so I need to be at places where the industry is located. And my self-worth was tied up into how my career was going. So there was a point, like, if my calendar was full, I felt good about Mike. If my calendar was light, I'm not good enough. I need to do more. I need to get on more stage. I need to network with more people. So I was just so driven by what my career appeared to be. And so that was just so destructive, because I don't think I could have ever been enough. Because if I get this one accolade, this one opportunity, there are 10 others that I didn't get. Or, I got on this show, but I didn't get a sitcom. I didn't get a movie. I didn't get an Oscar. I didn't get, there's always some next thing. Yeah, I got this special, but HBO, I'm not on HBO. Yeah, it's for this particular network, but it's not for that particular network. So I just felt myself like a yo-yo. I would be up, I would be down. I would be up, I would be down. And so as I was and then I live in Columbia, South Carolina, right? So there not going to be any industry execs sitting at the open mic, at the hookah spot that I was doing on Wednesday night with 7 people in there. It's just like, there's no one that's like, hey man, I'm working on this screenplay, and you would be perfect. For the lead.
Oh, that's so perfect. Because I remember even when I started RESGEN, I had some people come and say, who in the world is going to bring a speaker in from South Dakota? And it's not even the pretty side of the state. It's like the flat side, right? So, that is so perfect. Okay, so you're in South Carolina. You're saying that the execs aren't coming to the hookah spot. I get it. I love it. Okay, so. And
so I'm looking at it, and, and I'm growing in my faith. Like I'm asking God, what am I supposed to be doing this? Why am I doing this? I'm serving in my church. I'm working full time. I have a family. It became overwhelming. It just was just like, and I just couldn't cross all the T's and dot all the I's. And I had this profound insight around my perspective. It's like, Mike, you're looking at this wrong. The way that you are visioning your career or what you're supposed to be doing with your life, you're only looking at it through the lens of a comedian. Like, that's so limiting of what all I've given you, I've invested into you, and I want out of your life. Like, your purpose is not just tied to comedy. Like, that's a part of a skill set that you've mastered, but that's not who you are. And so I started making the change in my mind instead of seeing myself as a comedian, especially for a business standpoint. I started seeing myself as an entrepreneur and saying I'm a business person that has the ability to influence folks with the skill of comedy. And I'm a believer, so I'm doing kingdom business as an entrepreneur. And so now that opened up opportunities. Okay, I'm not just tied to how my comedic career plays. I can speak, and I can serve people in so many other ways than just me getting on stage doing a comedy set. And so I think that began opening my eyes to like, okay, I can serve folks by helping them be more engaging on stage and helping them to be better storytellers, to use humor to punch up their presentations and their trainings. I can also not only do comedy, but I can speak and I can provide a humorous presentation for a business owner or for a employee appreciation or for a volunteer appreciation opportunity. So it was a widening of my perspective in terms of more than just comedy. And even not even my perspective of it, it's other people's perspective. So people were, I would see folks and be like, hey man, you still doing your little stand up? You still doing your little routines, your little skits? And that used to just like burn me up. Like, I heard you still, you're doing your little Christian, people put like the little parentheses, Christian, your little women's tea comedy, your little men's breakfast comedy shows you're doing over there with the kids, the youth revival comedy shows. So, and when you put Christian on stuff, people try to make it like it's an inferior product. Like, so, and people would say like, he's a comedian. He's a Christian comedian. And some people say with like a pride, because like, he's not like those dirty guys. He's not like those nightclub guys that swear every other word. He's a Christian comedian. But then there are folks that kind of lessen what I was doing. And just comedian in general. I think a lot of it was just tied to how I felt I was being perceived. Like, when you're a comedian, it's easy for you to feel like everybody thinks you're the fun guy. Life, people tell my wife, "Oh, I bet y'all just have a ball at home." It's just
nonstop laughter,
a barrel of laughter, man. From the rising of the sun to the going down of the same. It's just no, it's not. It's not at all.
Exactly.
It is not. All
they always expect. When I've had, I had Johnny W., who's a good friend of yours, and Dustin Dickerson on the podcast in the past, and I've done events with both of those guys. And there's just a pressure when you put on, the comedian title, and like, okay, so you're the funny guy, or let's just say you're, if you're in the executive world and you're the president of this company or whatever. Okay, so you have all the answers,
right?
And we can begin to think that we have to be that,
right? Like
we have to always be on stage. We have to always be the one with the answers, and then that creates the issue of what do we do when we don't. Like when we don't have it. And if our identity is solely based in that, then it begins to be based on just gigs. And I remember even like, brother, you're speaking exactly the messaging that I had in my head. And as a number 3 on the Enneagram, that's a bit about production, and performance and all of that.
Right.
If it's solely based on that, on our performance, regardless of the field that we're in, even in our dadhood, right? Because there's days where, I don't know about you, but there's days where I fail as a dad.
Right.
Maybe not you, Mike.
Right. No.
But there's times where I fail as a dad and saying, okay, thank God for his grace, the grace of those around us, for my kids, the grace of my wife, my kids, the grace of those that we work with, we rub shoulders with. But let's not try to say, well, that's the way I am, but saying, okay, how do we lean into the work like we just talked about? And say, okay, so what does that look like to, try to continue to pursue becoming better and greater and all that. And which I want to make sure that we touch on some specific ways that you have done that.
Right.
But before we do that, Mike, I also want to just touch on real quick, because you mentioned about bringing humor laughter into your presentations for businesses, for different events, and specifically like as you've seen you utilize humor and laughter, the role that's played in work culture,
right,
or your home culture, and
right,
in your life in general.
Right.
Like a lot of times we don't laugh enough. We take ourselves so seriously. So when you're in a business and you're speaking with them about some things that they just need to do in their work culture, how does laughter and humor help that just there and in life?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's so many examples of the scientific benefit of laughter, whether endorphins and dopamine are released in your body. It takes less muscles. It takes more muscles to frown and to smile. There's so many examples of that. But then here's the other thing I talk about. There's really only two types of rooms that I go into. One that has laughter or one that needs laughter. So it doesn't matter whether you have a comedian there. When camaraderie is good, when relationships are solid, people laugh, people smile, they enjoy each other's company. When there's no laughter, there's no conflict. Like people are being on edge. They can't be honest. They can't communicate. They don't feel like they're a part of a team. If you watch teams, normally the team that's winning is the team that's more enthusiastic and more jovial and giving high fives. And even if things aren't going well, they're like, hey, man, the next play, we got it. They're talking, they're communicating, they're engaged with one another. So in the corporate space, it's important to bring your whole self. That's the thing that I think that's shifted from our generation to this current generation. We used to be told business is where you are professional and you come in and it's business and you you're a robot and you don't share your personal life and you don't share your dreams and your goals and what's happening. But we don't live in that type of society. It's not 1950 anymore where you come home with a trench coat in the newspaper and you catch up on the day's events. Like we know at each moment, breaking news, something has happened. We're connected nonstop, whether it's with text or instant messaging. And so we need to make the shift in corporate to keep people, to retain people, and to allow people to be their best self so you can get the most productivity out of them. Mm-hmm. Like if I'm not a part of your team, I'm not going to give you your best work. Now, I'm going to come and collect a paycheck. I'm going to come and clock in and do my hours, but you're not going to get my ideas. You're not going to get you're not going to get my commitment. You're not going to get me holding others accountable. I'm just going to come in, get my check, do the minimum and go home. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot of folks that are working in their jobs just doing the minimum. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't bode well for your organization. That doesn't bode well. And that's where we spend the majority of our day in an environment not being our best self.
Right. and then because of that, we bring that home with us. Right. And we pull into the driveway, we pull into the garage, and then we're bringing like angst or dissatisfaction, feelings of just being bummed, right? Just being bummed out.
Not being fulfilled in what we've done.
Yeah.
It's been a wasted day, unproductive. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to kick the cat and I'm gonna speak a little louder than I should.
Now you got cat lovers mad out there, Mike.
And this is imaginary cat. I love cats. So this is imaginary cat. This is a hypothetical cat.
Oh man!
But so here's a simple thing: if you are in corporate and you are wanting to be more engaged and being more of a team player, tell stories. Tell stories. Don't just give facts and figures. Don't just say, "Hey, the market's down 21%." Tell a story. Like what has impacted the markets? Why is it down 25%? That caused people to be connected to you. And tell a story. Tell stories about your life. Tell stories about, why are you in advertising? Why did you choose to become a social worker? Why did you want to sell cars? Like, share a portion of yourself. And we live in this mindset of like extremes. I'm gonna either do it or I'm gonna don't. Like, you don't have to tell all your business. Tell a story. perfect one story.
Yeah, nobody go home and say, well, Mike said on the Giving Life podcast, and I'm supposed to go tell a story, and like 3 hours later, I left that dude's office.
No. One story, 5 minutes. Let's start there.
Yes. Which is also, like even just sharing your faith. I mean, it's kind of like you don't got to go all the way back. Well, when I was born and all this kind of thing. It's like here's just a little snapshot of who I was before I met Christ. Here's the difference or how I met Christ, and then this is the difference He's made. Spend the most time on like the difference that He's made rather than whatever. But I think that's so funny. But I think even that though is. We live in a culture where we really do want to talk. I mean, we really do want to kind of just share some stuff. And sometimes we have so many walls built up,
right,
where we don't do that. So in our workspaces, how are we creating that environment where there's an openness to that in our homes?
Right.
As dads, are we creating a space where our kids, feel like they can be able to share openly and the safety and that idea of a room that has laughter or needs laughter. That's a convicting one for me to hear, Mike, because so many times I can be so productivity minded,
right?
And I remember back when I've got 2 boys. One's in college and one's a sophomore in high school right now. But this was several years ago. And my oldest son, he said, "Dad, it's not about productivity all the time." And I'm like, no, it is.
It absolutely is.
Even though I knew it wasn't, right? but it's so true. Like we can get in that productivity mindset at work, at home, wherever, and then that can lead to a transactional mindset.
Right.
And so I just think that is so good that comment that you made, and that's one that I'm going to be taking with me from our time here together. Well, before we kind of I'm going to prepare you for something real quick before I ask you this final question. At the very end of our podcast, we always do something called the final word. Okay, where I'm going to give you just about 30 to 60 seconds to kind of share a final word with listeners and viewers in that. So that's going to be coming up after this, but. I want to talk about real quickly about just we talked about leaning into the work, bettering ourselves. You and I have similar backgrounds where we had some pain and some struggle in our childhood,
right?
Some dad stuff. You already spoke about how your mom was filled with the Holy Spirit, your dad was filled with different kind of spirits. But this past year, you really came to a point where you said, I'm going to not try to deal with that pain or deal with my past or whatever by myself.
Right.
And, you've in the past, a lot of pastors or different people to speak into it, but you really made the choice to say, I'm going to go and seek some professional counseling that can help my mental health, that can just really help me process in a way, give me some things that I can maybe put into practice or what have you, that will really have and that really had a great impact on you just as a man first.
Right.
And then as a husband, as a father, and as a follower of Jesus. So first, what I want you to answer is like, how did you overcome the mental hurdle that it took to say, I'm going to be willing to go get help and take that step and strip off the layer of pride and so forth?
So what happened for me, I realized that I'm obsessed with results. So once I realized something can get me a result, I'm in. I understand the principle. So working out. So I'm a guy that says, okay, I want to be physically active. I don't have to look like I'm being a physique show. I don't look like I have to play for a professional team, but I want to stay active. I want to move. I want to at least sweat and challenge myself physically.
Yeah. So
I noticed as I was getting older, my workout regimen wasn't working anymore. Like the stuff I would typically do, I go get the little $10 membership at Planet Fitness and I'd get into Men's Fitness and I'll get one of those workouts and I'll go and do it. And I wasn't getting results.
Yeah.
Wasn't getting results. And so I paid a guy, I joined some physical training thing and it was like, oh, results. Follow these eating plans, follow these workouts, these days. Okay. So if we pay someone that is an expert in an area, they can help us get results faster. Like I could get results doing my men's workout fitness thing and doing the Planet, but I didn't get it at the moment and at the rate I wanted. And that opened my mind to like, okay, physical fitness, what about my brain? Like, how do I take care of my brain? So I need to sleep and I need to meditate and I need to pray. So I found myself about a year ago at this point where I'm at the best stage in my life. If you looked at all the indicators, I was making the most money. My calendar was full. I was having great opportunities. People knew about me. They were recommending me. I had a buzz on my name. My family life was going well. It seemed like everything was so on the up and up, but inside I was an emotional wreck. And I couldn't figure it out. I just couldn't. I was like, okay, is it the money? No, we have money. Is it because I'm not working? I'm working, I'm working a lot. Is it because my wife and I? No, we're not at that odds. Is it because the kids are? No, we're good. Like there was no thing that I could point to that would make sense of why I felt this way. I felt emotionally unstable. I just felt like I couldn't be happy. I just didn't measure up. I wasn't doing enough. I wasn't fast enough. I wasn't strong enough. I wasn't big enough. Like it just wasn't happening internally. And I said, I can't do this alone. Like I need to sit with someone and navigate. And I had some trauma, from my childhood that I never talked about. So I just kind of, with men, we just push stuff down. And the way I would do it, everything I compartmentalize. So I would have these bad experiences and I just put them in this closet. I just keep putting them in the closet. Where apparently the closet started to overflow into the house. And it was for so many years I was able to just stuff it away.
You were hoarding.
I was just hoarding all this emotional trauma in this closet. And it got to the point where the door wasn't able to hold it back. And it started affecting. And I'm looking at myself like, hey man, what's wrong with you? We're good. It's like, no, we're not good. And if I don't deal with this, we're going to be very bad.
Yeah. And so you decide, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Which even as a person of faith, a lot of times we think, well, if I could just pray harder, if I could just read the scripture more.
I need to fast more.
Okay, what spiritual discipline am I not like learning my full weight of my body into or whatever, right? And I think that's sometimes what we can do.
Yeah.
And of course, and then as men, it's like, well, no, I can figure this out.
Yeah.
So then what difference has that made?
So I was explaining to you at lunch, we talked, I used to perpetually walk around simmering. Like I wasn't angry, but I wasn't very far from anger. So I just had this, my body temperature probably was 2 to 3 degrees warmer because I just wanted something to pop off. Like I wanted the smoke. I wanted all the smoke. So I walked around and I hope somebody bump into me. I just had this anger from my childhood, from, my relationship with my father, from disappointments that had happened over the years. And I realized I was an angry guy. Like, most guys, there's about 5 things that we all are, challenged with. And anger is up there in that list.
Yeah.
And so even I would notice, like my response to my wife, she'd be like, why are you so angry? Like, I forgot to buy toilet paper. Like, why are you like at DEFCON 10? Like, I can go get some toilet paper. That's not a difficult thing. So it began to alleviate that pressure of just anger. Like I was able to breathe, and I felt like emotionally I was so reactive. I was good until I had to react. So there were things that that didn't bother me, that didn't bother me. But if something bothered me, I'm reacting. I'm not a wise man, and I'm not, thinking about it. And the Bible talks about having anger in your bosom. Like the fool has anger in his bosom. And I had anger in my bosom. Like my pastor, the way he talks about it, I had a short fuse. Like he was like, you need a long fuse. Like you don't need something to happen and then all of a sudden you explode. And so I realized, man, emotionally, I had a very short fuse, and I needed to figure out what was causing these things. Like the triggers, I didn't understand. The other thing I didn't understand was that it was all connected. Like it just wasn't like, No, I'm just passionate.
Yeah.
No, man, no, you're over the line. You're out of bounds. Like, and I would make these rationalizations of, no, man, I'm a passionate guy. You know, I'm really dedicated. I'm committed. It's like, no, man, you are angry. And so it took a while for me to begin to understand like what was happening emotionally. And the counselor gave a great illustration to me. And she basically told me it was like I had like these 3 different, and when I say personalities, it's not like schizophrenia or anything, but like the 12-year-old Mike, then it was like future Mike, then it was present Mike, and then there was like, so I think that's like 12-year-old Mike, future Mike, present Mike. So present Mike was in the back of the car asleep. Like this guy was out. 12-year-old Mike was driving the car, and future Mike was in the passenger side just like yelling at everybody. Like, you need to get up from sleeping. You need to get from behind the wheel. And like everybody was out of place.
Yeah.
And that's how my emotions were being dictated by issues I never resolved. So I had this, like my 12-year-old self constantly seeking affirmation and validation. And did you like that? Did I do a good job? I hope, you know, I do a great set on the show and I'll go to the person after. Did everybody have a good time? Did they enjoy it? Was it, I hope everything was well. And they're like, what are you talking about? That was fabulous.
Yeah.
Like, that was outstanding. I'm like, I hope it went well. It was just like this fake humility.
Yeah.
'Cause I wanted them to pat me on the back and say, man, you did a good job. And instead of saying that or feeling that within myself, I'm playing like a little boy and say, hey, did you like that?
Yeah.
I did a good job, didn't I? Please tell me I did a good job. Pat me on my head and say, good job, Mike. And so I was seeking those things unknowingly to me versus saying, hey, man, that was excellent. You prepared. You did a great job. And people are saying you did a great job. Like, like, so emotionally, it began to allow me to put emotions back in places where they should have been. Like, it was like clothes were out of boxes and I should have. It's wintertime. Why am I in sweat? Why am I in tank tops? Like that needs to be inside of a box. So it caused me to slow down and understand why I was doing some of the things I was doing.
Yeah, that's good. And then because of that, you know, that filters into every one of your relationships, you know, just obviously in how you carry yourself, how you relate and can love your wife.
Right.
And support her, affirm her, the way that the patience, the affirmation that you can give your kids.
Right.
And then the way that we respond to God, because a lot of times I think even we want God to tell us, like, we can be very performance oriented in our faith, and where if we feel like, oh man, you know, I really miss God's upset, and God's grace, He leads with grace,
right,
you know, and it's not based upon our performance, right? And that's what's so amazing about the gospel, right? While we were yet sinners, Christ died, you know. I mean, exactly.
Right.
So I mean that's I think that's an important message for men, especially to hear that you know there is, allow the humility to come into your life to say, you know what, let's get rid of the stigma of what counseling is, whatever it is in your brain, and say it's okay. It's okay. It doesn't make you weak.
Nope.
Doesn't make you lesser of a man.
Right.
It makes you someone that wants to get better and become more of who God created you to be.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's mental wellness. Like I look at it as wellness, all total body wellness. And the other thing, quickly to that, I wasn't present. I was so busy thinking about the past and the future. I was losing time right now. Because part of my unhappiness was where I was going. Oh yeah, man, when I get my own tour, when I get my special on HBO, it's like, no, man, things are good right now, today, at this moment. Or thinking about all the things that should have went a particular way in my past. Yeah, if I would have went to this college, maybe I would have had this job and I would have been living in this city. And cut all of those, I call them mental acrobatics, leave them alone. Like, quit going down those rabbit trails. Let's live the moment that we have right now. Let's be present in the moment that we inhabit.
Oh man, pretty good. Praise God for that message. That's good, Mike. All right, my friend. Well, we are at the end of our time together, and I can't thank you enough for spending some time with me at the Given Life table. That's what I've never called it that before, but that's what I'm calling it from now on. Is the Given Life table. You gave me some life today, and I believe that our conversation was a life-giving conversation for listeners today, and so I can't thank you for that. Obviously, your friendship and partnership ministry has been so much fun. Before we get to that final word that I warned you about, tell everybody how they can follow you, find you, all that kind of stuff.
So you can check me out at Bowtie Comedy on social media. I'm at Bowtie Comedy on Instagram and Twitter at Bowtie Comedy. You can also find me at my website, Comedian Mike Goodwin. Also on Facebook, I'm at Comedian Mike Goodwin. You can check me out on Dry Bar Comedy. Also, I just dropped the special. What you're not gonna do is not laugh at these jokes. And the clips have been being shared on social media. So check them out. Bowtie Comedy at Dry Bar. Well, Comedian Mike Goodwin at Dry Bar Comedy.
Okay, love it. All right, well, here it is. I've warned you.
Yeah, you did.
So you got 30 to 60 seconds, okay? 30 to 60 seconds. Final word for listeners and viewers here today.
Final word. So I do these talks to corporate, and there's three things I want you to do. I want you to be diligent. I want you to work hard at a craft, whether that is your faith, whether that is your job, your relationships. Be diligent. It's the principle of Mr. Miyagi. Wax on, wax off. Just keep waxing on, keep waxing off. Hard work will never not be a good thing. The next thing I want you to do is to be present. Be present in the moment. If you called 911 100 times, how many times do you want them to answer the phone? 100 times. No one ever says 88. No one ever says 17. So be present. And the last thing is to be generous. Be generous. Give of your time, give of your knowledge, and give of grace. That's one thing, not just to others, but to yourself.
Oh, man, that's good. That's a great final word. All right, Mike. Well, hey, blessings on you, my friend. Thank you again for being with me on the Giving Life podcast today.
Thanks for having me, man.
Well, that's a wrap on this episode of the Giving Life podcast, where my guest has been comedian Mike Goodwin. If you'd be so kind, please share it with others in your relational world that may benefit from our convo. And if you haven't done so already, I would be so grateful if you would take just a minute to rate and leave a quick review of the podcast. To connect more with Mike, head to his website, comedianmikegoodwin.com, and be sure to follow him on all of his social media channels as well, at Bowtie Comedy. Thanks again for joining us today. We'll see you next time on RESGEN's Giving Life podcast. Until then, continue being men whose life in Christ gives life to others.